experimenting, where Megan and Garrett are going to be more presenting. So welcome to yet another experiment by Citation Lab.
It's like a meta experiment
A
within
meta experiment
the
within an
experiment webinar. Yeah.
within an experiment.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Thank you very much for being here today. We're grateful to have you. So, number one, this is not Outreach 101, and in fact, I think one of the kinds of messages that we'd like to put out there is that really well, I guess there probably is Outreach 101. What am I saying? But if you're really looking for core best practices, they are probably they're a fine place to start. But if you stop there, if you stop experimenting there, you're going to see that you are quickly getting less and less response, less and less value out of your outreach. And Megan and I were just talking before the presentation that a lot of times best practices are things that we run to and cling to avoid failure, to avoid, I don't know, looking stupid or not having the kinds of response rates that we expect ourselves to have. So they're a great place to start, but if you are trying to design an outreach portion of your business or your organization, if you just have these best practices kind of carved in stone, you're going to end up with an organization that ultimately kind of grinds to a halt. When you stop experimenting is when you really start to fail, I think. Really, actually. So anyhow, so let's ask ourselves, why is outreach so important? Now, we are a link building agency that believes in outreach. Okay, so there's some organizations or SEO or content marketers who would tell you or posit that if you build great content, it will attract links naturally. It will. But this is about really kind of concertedly attracting links and in a bit more of an accelerated fashion. So, and then actually I say it will, sometimes it really actually won't. You can publish the best, before, I think we have some good slides to demonstrate this.
Yeah.
So, why is outreach so important? You're not guaranteed, just because you publish a fantastic article or webinar, in our case, like this one here, you're not guaranteed visibility. No, just because it's great doesn't mean people are going to see it. And I know this is probably the oldest cliche of internet marketing. If you build it, they won't come, but it is true. Just because you're great doesn't mean that people are going to see you or find you right away. So, especially if you're in a boring or saturated industry, all right? And it doesn't matter how good your content is. I mean, even the federal government in the U.S. promotes their new websites through press releases, I don't know if they actually do outreach. I should ask them if they need help with that.
Yeah, right. Well, and also one thing I wanted to bring up is the idea of like content shock, and I think it's an idea that I really find interesting. It was coined by Mark Schaefer a couple of years ago, but it's like the idea that there's so much content out there that even if you're publishing, I don't know, the Bible, it's just like there's just too much for consumers. So it like sets a very high bar, which is great, but then there's no way for a person to sift through it unless it's got a super viral capacity, like it has kittens. Basically, if you have kittens, then you're like safe.
But the thing is, a lot of the linkers out there, I mean, now this is a Citation Labs bias that everyone needs to be aware of, is that we don't just promote or try to build links from blogs and kind of newsy, bloggy type web pages or websites. We're also we're really looking heavily into links and resource pages and sections of people's websites. So these are very different types of a market than you might even be thinking of, right? So so much of the outreach best practices that are out there are really more PR or blogger engagement related. Anyhow, test, and yes, consumers are oversaturated with content, but so too are potential linkers, right? They really are, and they're certainly oversaturated with link request emails. So, all right, how do you know your outreach is as effective as possible? Wonderful question. here's what you do: you experiment. So this is why when we say, best practices are our starting point. Um, they may, even though it's a best practice or everyone in the industry tells you this is what you should do, certainly start there, but always experiment, except,
There is a hitch. Yeah.
yeah, if you have something that's already working and it's paying your bills, don't necessarily take resources off of it, okay? This is something that we really strive for with our existing clients. Is like, hey, you know, we charge per link, so if we don't get links, we don't get paid. We want to experiment and find a new way to build we'll try anything, but we do need to do what we know will work. So if you have something that's working and it's paying your bills, then do it, continue to do it, but start to use some of your monthly resources, budget, time, etc., for experimentation, right? And use that as a starting point. Use what's working as a starting point. A small portion of your outreach on what's working as a starting point for experimenting. So yeah, this is going to come down to how and when you choose to experiment will come down obviously to stuff like budget, timeline, client flexibility, and expectations. And I will say one of the biggest drivers for us lately on experimentation has been clients, and in particular, clients where we have high levels of accountability and weekly calls. That has been such a driver of like, we've got to make sure that we're getting these experiments done. So what you can take from that, though, folks, is that if you are able to build in another layer of accountability for yourself, or even with your own team, you're going to start weekly calls to talk and figure out what you've been experimenting with and what have people been saying, what kinds of responses have you been getting. Build in well, at least this is what worked for us. So this isn't a best practice. This is just what worked for us. Build in some more accountability for yourself.
But I would also say that those weekly calls and that accountability can also lead to brainstorming for more experiments.
Oh, yeah.
The closer you are with the client and the closer you are with what's going on their team, they might be like, oh, we're doing this thing. And you can be like, we can totally help with that and build links from that.
Yes.
This is great. So that's another reason to, stay close. Yeah.
That would be maybe even further on webinar, but because that item is so important. But it definitely helps in the outreach and really in the experimentations of really any kind of experiment you're doing. But it just to brainstorm something and then try it and test it and see what happens is probably one of the most compelling and exciting reasons for a client to get on the phone with you next time. It's like a cliffhanger sort of thing, a little bit.
But wait, there's more.
So anyhow, here's some experiment examples that we've done so far. I mean, not Garrett, but our team has done. And so Megan gathered these up and talked with our team, and some Megan has tried, so let's dig in. So I want to talk about this one, start with this one, because this is a big one. This is, so there's a best practice going around for a long time in the SEO space that a female persona, now by persona I mean the person doing the outreach or the purported person doing the outreach was better, you got better conversion rates if you did outreach as a female. We believed it. This was, we saw it, we read it, expert A, B, and C all said do this, so we did it. And that's really, that kind of bias is really rampant in SEO. It's not a bad thing. It's probably rampant in every industry. But again, it's why you experiment. But oddly, so topic and vertical and seem to have, and region maybe, seem to have an impact on what gender, or the role that gender can play in response rates or conversion rates in terms of link building. Autism, like with an autism resource, or even autism, I don't know if it was the same in like blogging areas, but the obviously male name got twice as many links, okay? That's crazy. And I don't know who thought to test it or why we decided to try it, but holy moly, like that was an exciting test to have tried. Now, I I don't know why. I'm an American, and I am just which is a huge bias in its own right. I thought that I don't know why, but that men would have a better response rate or success rate in France. But heck no. The female had 3 times as many response rates,
Yeah.
13% more links than the male. So Megan, can you talk to that a little bit? Like you tried that one.
Yeah, that
You
was
set up
my
that
experience.
test,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
Yeah.
it just kind of yeah, it was interesting just to see that even when people didn't link, just more positive responses in terms of thank you very much, and we really appreciate this information came to our female outreacher versus the male, which was a bit more just he just didn't get as much love in
It's
return.
astounding, right?
So yeah, no, it really is. But it's again, yeah, it really goes to show that I mean, who knows? It could have been that
Who
topic.
knows?
It could have been, yeah, a number of things. So it's not just that Americans prefer men and French
Right.
people prefer women.
Right, right,
It's so
right.
much more complicated than that. But
You
it's
need to
just
test another vertical in France to
yeah,
find out, like, is
and
is
more.
there, and I think we should continue doing that. So, let's not just assume that women work best in France, but we know that there's going to be, on a topical basis, there's going to be a difference. And I wonder about platform basis too, whether it's we're outreaching to a links and resource page versus outreaching to a blog, if there's any kind of difference that we might see there as well, any kind of bias. But listen, this one was really to me is one of the biggest because it's one of the oldest in our industry, which is just that a female persona, when at the in the inbox gets a better response rate, and it isn't true. It just isn't true. But what is true is that we don't know what the best is, and you just need to be kind of trying it on a topical basis and regional basis. You should be experimenting with both just to see what happens. So, personal beyond personalization. This is more about exhibiting personality in your email, right? It's not necessarily about personalizing and saying, "Hey, I noticed that you really like Jello. And me too. This is crazy."
Because that would
Um,
be Outreach 101. That's for things.
yeah, yeah.
We're talking about that in the other room in Outreach 101. Yeah.
This is showing my personality in the email, and I think that is. And so there's some stuff we've experimented there. I don't know, Megan. We don't really have numbers around this. Yeah, we haven't really like truly tested. I guess like
We've
test tested
tested it anecdotally. Yeah, we have anecdotal internal experiments, but nothing that's statistically
where
significant
we've
enough that
really
we can be
tracked
like,
it.
yeah,
So whatever, you guys can completely ignore this for that purpose. But these are some of the things we have experimented with. I like the offer to get on the phone. Number one, we're not afraid to get on the phone. I think it's a good thing. Depending on the vertical and the volume of interest, of course, but I think I don't know if, Megan, we're not really talking about this in this presentation, I don't think, but the phone-based research for sure, like what
yeah.
do linkers actually want to link to, is one of our most powerful kinds of sources of content ideas. Because when you're on the phone with someone, you can be a lot more flexible, a lot more I don't know. I guess opportunistic is a way to put it, but that's not a very pleasant way to put it. But a lot more flexible about how to lead the conversation, and you can have a richer discovery session. But anyhow, it's
But
all that aside, saying, "Hey, I'd be happy to get on the phone," gives you a legitimacy in the email.
they know you're
Um,
not just a robot. Like,
yeah.
they can actually call a human being and
So we do
talk to them.
know that we have fewer opt-outs from that.
Yeah,
That's we have that. Oh
fewer
wow.
fewer angry, yeah, angry
Okay.
people. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. What I'm reading now, and so everybody listening to this is going to put that in their email, so that won't work forever. Like the hey, we'd be happy to get on the
Like,
phone.
what? Yeah,
But anyhow,
not again.
the what I'm reading now, and I like it doesn't have to be what I'm reading now, but like this was because we noticed this on I think a library website. They had something like what the librarians were reading now, and it's kind of like some local stores will say Bob's picks for the video, Bob's favorite videos. I don't know if anybody goes to video stores anymore, but back in my day, we had these places where you had to walk in and get a video from. You couldn't just download it, but I've seen that at beer stores also. The craft beer stores, they'll say somebody's name, love, this is their pick. Music stores sometimes used to have them. So it's the same kind of thing. It's like it gives you a sense of this person's interests. It gives you a sense of this person's kind of connection to the either the space to some extent, and it could be what I'm reading, not just books, but like art, like my favorite articles lately or favorite websites lately that I've found. Anyhow,
Just another way of
uh,
adding personality.
yeah, yeah, a little flavor, right? Logos and photos and email signature. Um, this is a kind of further legitimizer if you're outreaching not as the client, or even if you're outreaching as yourself, like, or whatever, however it may be, they add another kind of layer of legitimacy, I think. Plus, you can track over rates, so that's definitely helpful for tracking. Um, so, Megan, anything that I left out on this?
No, not really. I think we got it. Yeah.
So, experiment with. This is in the body of your pitch, right? So we've talked about like gender of the person pitching. We've talked about kind of little personalizations, pitcher personalizations you can add in. Um, then you can also experiment with like the order of information, and you can and should experiment with this because we've tried like resources, like link targets first, followed by like a long like the story. We've or like how the benefit of adding these links or why they should add these links to the page. Yeah, should you do an anecdote first? A mission, like I'm on a mission. Um, this is, we're trying to change the world in this way. Will you join us by adding these resources? That sort of thing. Should it be mission based? And where and how much personalization should there be? And remember, we're not talking. Well, I guess we can be talking about recipient. I think
Yeah,
that's
there's
another
both
kind of
kinds.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's something to kind of split out and think about more clearly. Is like personalization of the person sending the email might be more important than the person who's receiving it. Um, Not that we don't want to under personalize, but there's
Right.
almost a level of creepy to that. Not super creepy, I guess, but
Well, also
um,
just people get so used to those generic emails, like we get them, in their inbox, like,
like,
"Hi,
hey, I see you like,
I saw this thing. I thought you
yeah,
would like it," and it's
yeah,
like, come on, like, whereas if it's like a human, like, be a human.
yeah, yeah. You may need to, this is a real kind of, you have to, link building is all about relationships. We believe that linkers and bloggers don't necessarily want more relationships. So there is something to be said for like not really trying to be super good
Not
friends with
stalking
them
them. Yeah.
necessarily. Yeah, that whole stalking thing. Now I did hear a lot, like was at a conference recently, someone giving a presentation on PR, Murray Newlands, and I forget the other fellow, do.com was his website, but they both did a lot of PR. But they are doing, they're slowly trying to build a relationship with a reporter, a tech reporter, for example, and are just kind of where the value is so high to the link. It's not a link. It is actually the publicity they're going for, where they spend time stalking the person. But I still believe that it's more about the value that you are presenting in the email more so than the relationship. Because there's emails that I've sent on behalf of my company and asking for a link, or not even a link, but some kind of engagement where just the value wasn't there. And so even if it's a friend, it doesn't matter, because the value of the email isn't there. They're not going to say yes just because you're their friend, and they shouldn't, because they need to be self-interested. So if you're able to kind of position value effectively, I think that's ultimately more important, I believe, than relationship. That's my belief. I don't have any proof for anyone, but anyhow, that's what I guess we should figure out an experiment for that. This is the other thing. Day of the week and time of the day. So again, another huge area where people try to get it right. just they're like, oh, we have to get this just right.
Tuesdays, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And really, there's a lot more to be said, again, for that value of the email versus the time of day, and then the subject line. Like, what are we, what are we about? But yeah, there's a group of people, and I don't know exactly who they are, but I call them weekend warriors or weekend business owners
Or
or weekend
evening.
yeah, evening too. Just because a lot of these websites that we're outreaching to, not all of them, but a lot of them, or some of them, I don't know what percentage, but they are operated by one person, and it's not their day job. So when do they work on it? They work on it at night and on the weekends. And in some cases, even like Gov or EDUs or
Nonprofits
boards.
as well, I would
Yeah,
say. Like,
yeah.
a lot of times they're run by volunteers who
Totally,
have to
totally,
work,
and they're going to get to it on the weekends. So there's something to be said, and this is just, again, I think so many of the best practices articles are about blogs and PR that people kind of think that that's going to be interchangeable for other forms of link building or all forms of outreach for whatever you're pitching, and really it does. We find that it really varies, and we're primarily agnostic about when we send now. I think I would have to
for the
check with
most
the
part, yeah.
overall team, but we try to bias towards the time zone in the morning, but I anyhow, test, test, test. Just don't believe what you see about day of week and time of day. And really, ultimately, I think more important is the value in the email and your subject line. Like, am I really selling this, the value of linking to this or these resources effectively? What are we actually pitching? So anchor text and or raw URLs. How many resources are we adding? So we always are adding multiple to emphasize our altruism, to provide some cover for the link that's being built. So which resources are most successful in getting links? So we can actually, we can see, if we're pitching multiple resources, we can see if someone links to our client or our target resource, and they or if they don't link to our target but link to our other valued resources that are in there, then we can start to learn that we've got probably a problem with that piece, that specific piece, because we definitely see for any site that we have control over or analytics control, we can see an increase in traffic to pitched pages when we're doing outreach. We can see it. People go visit that website and that page and they click around, So it's not always, not everyone, but quite often, if someone is a great curator, they're going to look at that page, and that's the people who you really want links from too, is the people who are really digging in there to see if this is really a valuable resource. But anyhow, you can learn a lot about the quality of your resource and is it where it needs to be if you pitch more than one resource in your outreach. It could be a good kind of baseline for that sort of study. Let's see. Oh, goodness gracious. So here's a lot of things to experiment with.
Like a grab bag of
this is
everything
all
else.
of it.
So
All of it.
I would say the previous slides were kind of breaking down what we're just listing here in terms of these are so many other things that you can break down in so many ways about what to experiment with.
So
at the bottom, any other variable you can think of,
Let's add a link at some point for folks to the article, because I think the article talks through, doesn't it talk through the subject line and the grammatical errors, that sort of thing. I think it's wonderful stuff. So all of these are other items to kind of experiment with, and items about which there are lots of best practices. So many people are going to go out and tell you in an article, this is how to do, this is the golden guide to outreach. We don't believe in that. We do believe that it's a great starting point, but that anytime you're over relying on metrics, you are kind of blinding yourself, and it's just kind of our internal motto is we're just not going to just trust metrics necessarily. We do, of course, at the end of the day, conversion rate on links is a metric that will sway us for sure. But anyhow, so if I guess I could read these, you guys can read these on your own after the presentation. But
Or go to the
Megan,
article.
is there anything in here that yeah,
I
just
put the article in
read
the
the
chat
article. Let us know if you
box.
have questions. Yeah, yeah. Oh, the one that I really like is the current events as an opener. So like again, something to experiment with, and it depends on what you're pitching or promoting. But we really do see, and I don't know if we mentioned this in this webinar, but we do see a when we are seasonal, when we're writing about, when we have a pitched resource or a blog post perhaps that we'd like to have placed that has a current events relevance to it or a seasonality to it, for example, there were wildfires going rampant in the news and in real life, I guess last month. And so anything like if an article about wildfires would be very would be of increased interest at that time to a recipient. So these are kinds of things that you can experiment with and should certainly be trying out. Just is there some kind of current event we can tie in to this outreach that's going to make it feel more pressing and more important. So this is going to be mostly Megan's section, as I like to come up with the experiments, but then there's another side to the experiment. It's not just something fun to try. It's, well, how do we really learn about whether it's working or not, or what's working? So it isn't enough just to have a Garrett around to come up with ideas. We need a Megan also to also come up with ideas, but also to hold us accountable for learning from our experiments. So Megan, will you talk us through that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think one of the most, and this might be kind of going back to the basics, but really it's just, one of the most important parts of setting up any experiment is making sure that you're doing a split test, that you're choosing a variable to test. I mean, I think, and a lot of times you can do this, like, is it a male or a female outreach? Or are we including this line that we don't include? So, literally taking the list of people you're contacting, splitting it in half, or splitting it in three, but making sure you have a control group that you're doing whatever you quote unquote normally do, just so you can really see how it works within that group and then kind of build it out in terms of a bigger outreach. And also just making sure that you're coordinating with everyone on the team, having the template writer and the outreach team all working together, working. This involves a lot of spreadsheets. This is kind of the part where the fun idea of experimenting turns into this, a lot more of an actual project.
Not as much fun.
Yeah. Well, it's fun for some people to make spreadsheets.
Fair
But
enough.
yeah. No, exactly. It's where the fun and games and ice cream sundaes turn into actual. There's actually a lot more work, honestly, to do
Yeah.
experimenting than to just be like, okay, let's just send a bunch of emails and see what happens. You really have to plan
I
out and
think
make.
that's important, and I don't know how to discuss this clearly, but it's like experiment viability. Like,
Right.
should we really even try this? Because I have learned at last to ask that ahead of time. Is like, basically, if we experimented with this, how much of a headache would that cause, basically? Or
Like, is it worth the
yeah,
experiment? Yeah.
yeah. So anyhow, excuse me, keep going.
No, that's true. And I think, just trying to eliminate as much as possible. Well, you can go to the next slide, I guess, because I talked about
Okay.
this a little bit on the next slide. But yeah, having a control group and really trying to eliminate extraneous variables. So trying to send at around the same time, or trying to make sure that what the different groups, that there's really only one thing that you're testing, which is kind of just more of a good science practice in general. But it's kind of also what makes it a headache sometimes, because you're having to really make sure that you're only
There's so many
tuning up one thing.
potential variables or
Yeah,
unforeseen variables, I think, in this effort.
yeah.
So
And also just, as much as it's a learning, it's also, don't take the learnings too broad. It's just,
mm,
when you're doing a split, being like, okay, like, so in France, a woman outreacher in the eco space works better, but, maybe we're not just going to write an article and be like, females work better, aha, because of this,
right, right.
so this is really where the difference between, testing and success and then best practices come into play, where you're doing different experiments, you're trying different things, you're like, and then eventually it's not like experiments, you're always like, I gotta experiment again, after a couple of times when, the woman keeps succeeding. Then now in our French outreach, I'm using exclusively, the female outreachers, because I'm confident enough that that works. But
Hmm.
so it's just in that, for that group in that campaign, that's what we're doing from
Right,
now on. But
right.
it's not just across Citation Labs, I think is the.
This speaks to something important though, which I don't think we've addressed, which is a volume of opportunity. And like, so we are talking about spaces where we've got maybe 1,000+ people to send an email to, yeah?
Mhm.
In that range, 500 to 1,000. So it's not like we have 10, because with 10
Right.
people to send emails to,
Right.
like, you're not
Well,
going to really learn
that's
very much.
that's
Yeah,
where you do get you can be much more highly
yeah.
personalized
So I
too.
think that's
And you're
important
like,
too, as far as understanding our position and how we're constructing our best practices for you. um, but we do have quite a few emails to learn from, and I think that's anyhow.
yeah, no, that's
Just
good.
an important note, and to be able to get to that level of statistical relevance, right? Like, does it really? Is this really a statistic, or is it just what happened, and we didn't have enough of a large enough group? I think is kind of an important thing to ask as well.
Yeah, and you can go to the next slide. But yeah, so finally, there are some experiments that don't really lend themselves to split testing. And this is more, like at Citation Labs lately, we've been doing a lot more PR, and we might be talking to our client and decide to take, an entire campaign in a whole new direction. That's maybe something we've never even really, like an entirely new type of campaign we've never tried before. And in that way, we have no control group, or, it's just kind of like, let's see how this works. So then, trying to figure out how to establish metrics for failure and success and how well it's doing, even when you can't split test. And I
Mm,
think that that's something that you need to decide beforehand. And that's, again, like Garrett was talking about previously, where, really, really good communication comes into, and explaining to the client or management or whoever, like, okay, like, we're so excited to try this. We've
yeah.
never done this before. Like, this, like, let's talk, there's a risk here. And I think actually, you'd be surprised, but I think a lot of the right kind of client, the right kind of person will really appreciate that. They want
Oh
new,
yeah.
fresh ideas. So it's
It's so fun. Yeah, yeah.
it's a little scary, I think, to be like, I don't, we haven't done this before. But I think that's what kind of makes you cutting edge as well, or it's like, all right, I'm willing to try new things,
Yeah.
but being clear about that, not just being like, oh yeah, this will for sure
This
work.
will definitely work. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Um, we've we've long since stopped making that mistake. That was
couldn't
painful.
backfire. It would just too
Yeah,
much, too
yeah,
much.
definitely. Yeah,
But yeah, that's about that.
awesome. So what are outreach thinking best practices? What is outreach thinking, Megan?
So yeah, outreach thinking is kind of the idea around this entire webinar, where it's like, instead of there are outreach best practices, there's kind of the idea of
Ah,
experimenting, or the try
okay,
and see method. So it's like,
okay.
not, we're not saying these are best practices that will always and forever work, but these are some things that we've learned that to value so highly that, like, if there were such thing as a best practice, these would be them.
This is as close to best practices as you're going
Yeah,
to get from us, ladies and gentlemen. So,
yeah.
well
That's I should have just
said.
said go to the next slide.
Yeah, yeah, I love this. This is fantastic. Yeah, we don't like rules. We like them, but we don't trust them necessarily or believe that they're always right. But yeah, anything that we do internally repeatedly is something that hasn't yet stopped working. I love it. So okay, this is our main rule, right? Like, this is
Yeah,
our
this
fundamental.
is the highlight of the webinar right here.
Okay.
Slide.
Provide value. And I think the other kind of when you say something like provide value, this is almost like saying make great content. It isn't, but understanding what value is to the person receiving your email before you send the email. Now, you can certainly send an email to learn about what's valuable to someone, and we do that. But really understanding and pitching value means that you know your linker. I don't mean you know them personally, but you know what they have linked to in the past and what is important to them. A lot of times this can be kind of figured out topically. So this is why we do like to work so topically, because you can kind of figure out what's valuable within this topic. So anyhow, and again, we are a lot talking about the kind of links and resource page curators as an audience, not just bloggers and blogs, but absolutely your email, if it provides value, is going to get links, and that's kind of the core. And figuring out that there's an equation in there somewhere, but value is what you are. You're selling. You are selling in your email. You're selling the value of someone taking 5 minutes or maybe even less to crack open their CMS and add something to their page. So
yeah, it's kind of
the reason. Yeah, right. This is kind of the. Will you talk us through this, Megan?
Yeah, sure. So these are basically, like I was saying, like you were just saying with providing value. This is also just providing a reason for linking. And it can be a lot of different things. Like Garrett was talking about the relevant information, topic fit, making sure you're saying, I know, that the content you're delivering, it has something to do with them and it's not just totally out of the blue. But also, there are different ways that you can provide value. If you have, an award or a community membership, something that you can say like, hey, we noticed that your company does this, and and this might be something that's probably for a much smaller grouping. You have to kind of vet out some websites that you want to have. This is more relationship based link building, I guess, but it's a great way to give them something and say, we're giving these award, or we're for nonprofits, setting up donations, or just making connections however you make them. And this has to do a lot with experimenting too, but just having a reason for sending that email as opposed to just spray.
So, overqualifying, yes, absolutely. You're in the wrong inbox when. So yeah, so finding the right inbox. This is huge. So there's a lot of different types of qualifying that can and should occur. One certainly is, does what I'm pitching fit on this page? The other is, do I have the right person to send an email to?
There's that exception. and that's kind of our this always works except for when there are those times when you've wrongly qualified. It's like and so it's like a best practice, but like Garrett, you have your example of the .gov link that you got that you may not have gotten if you noticed that it was
DA if I had been doing just metrics. So that's absolutely right. So we've one disqualify that we used to do was too low DA and too high DA. We're looking for that kind of a sweet spot DA, and now we're really more concerned about topical relevance. But yeah, we did if I had been in charge of choosing whether to email a federal government website and asked for a guest post, I would have said, no way, are you crazy? That's a stupid thing to do. You're going to waste your 5 minutes. But we ended up getting a guest placement there, and it was because we just tried it. So this is there is room for fuzziness, I believe, in qualifying. In some cases, you can kind of let the person guide you. If your email has that a little bit of flexibility around in it, you can let that person guide you if you're demonstrating some kind of value, you may be guided, for example, to another inbox that's more relevant, the right inbox perhaps. You could be guided perhaps to a different page of the site where you really actually are a better fit. Sometimes people, this doesn't happen in the inbox. Someone doesn't say, "Oh, you'd be a better fit on this page. I'm going to add you there." They just put you on a different page. So I almost always feel like it's better to send the email and not be quite sure than I believe in sending to the probablys as opposed to if you can't be 100% sure, then don't do it. I like to send to this probably is a good fit here. But again, there isn't necessarily a hard and fast line. Megan, is that, am I getting that?
Yes.
Is there more message here? Is that's okay. Okay. And this is again a core for us. Don't assume any rule is always reliable, especially not in a new space or a new vertical. One of my favorite. So we totally thought that, I think it's 2011, 2012. We were really just doing broken link building. That was like all we were doing. We only had maybe 3 or 4 clients at the time, and our biggest client was in the addiction and recovery space, and broken link building at the time there was very, very productive. There are just a lot of dead addiction recovery resources out there, and I was oblivious at that point to the fact that each topic, each vertical is different. And so I thought broken link building could potentially easily scale for any type of business, any type of topic. You can make it work for a lot of different websites, but you do have to have quite a bit of, in some cases, topical flexibility and kind of the capacity to intersect your brand with other brands. But anyhow, that was a rude awakening, that broken link building really doesn't necessarily work in a one-to-one capacity for sure in every vertical. So don't assume, and I guess it isn't necessarily what this slide is about, but just because something works in vertical A doesn't mean it's going to work in vertical
Well, it does kind of, on the next slide, it's, outreach is a moving target is kind of the point here. Yeah, it's just, unfortunately, that's kind of why we have to set up experiments, is because there is no hard and fast. When you're talking about people, you can't have, hard and fast rules. It's not an algorithm.
Again, though, if you are calling people, like I love this example. This is a great example. So we have been experimenting with Spanish first content or Spanish language content targeting Spanish first speakers in the U.S. We don't know. We're guessing based on what's been productive in English, but I don't know if we've done this yet or not, but is phone calls with links pages about what is really missing. Actually, no, we did suss some of that out in the veterinarian space, actually. So when you start to pull threads and you have a capacity, for us, for example, Spanish language English link building or US link building, once you have that capacity, then you can start to learn also. So just because we haven't been super successful, we've gotten actually a few great links, but not as many as I thought we would or as I was hoping for. But now that we have this capacity, though, we can go in and now start to learn. So I think that's another key kind of thing here. Not necessarily an outreach thing, but if you are getting a few links, then something's working. So maybe it is time then to get on the phone with your potential linkers and better understand what their needs are. So, but this is very much, just because something works in heart health doesn't mean it's going to work for the same content may not be as linkable,
or the same style. The same style of content.
So
same outreach practices.
Always changes.
But like we were saying at the beginning, some will work again and again and again and haven't failed yet, and those are what really become your best practices. Is the practices that just keep on working.
And that's funny, and for us, it really has been try it and see what happens is our best practice.
Yeah.
Like just experiment. It's kind of um, been how we've sort of learned to move forward most effectively. Um, so yeah, this is huge. Your templates, or really any of the kind of outreach you're doing, like the design of that template, the design of the experiment elements, like what are we going to be actually experimenting with, that needs to be senior people doing this. I mean, um, I get involved in this. I know Megan does. Our team is, anybody that is has been around a while is the one, are the people who are designing templates, and it's, you need a seasoned person on this, not somebody, again, reading the best practices article and
Yeah.
then just calling it a day. Um, Not that you don't. I mean, throw the job at them and see how they do, but then definitely edit. Have a strong editor. Oh yeah, absolutely. Always be respectful. We haven't experimented with that though. I mean, there might be a case
With
or where
when you, that's I
effective.
mean, that's
I'm just
true.
saying.
That's true. Well,
I'm
this
just
kind of
saying.
goes into the next couple of slides. So yeah,
Oh,
there's a
good.
but there.
Yeah.
Don't always just
Right.
point of like don't always take no for an answer. That doesn't mean keep barraging someone that
Yeah.
said again and again, please don't contact me. Be respectful, but there are ways to sometimes turn a no into or an ignore really into
Into
yes,
a conversation that could
yeah,
turn into a link or a conversion of some kind. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Um,
walk us through this, Megan. I love this one.
Yeah, no, so this is something we've been doing recently is we had a client that we were doing outreach for nonprofit participants to sign them up for a program that involved link building. And, we had a bunch of people that responded well the first time around, but then a bunch of people that just didn't respond at all, as happens. So 3 months later, we re-emailed everyone who had completely ignored the first email. And we didn't get as many responses, but we got it basically half. So our numbers cut in half, which makes sense because it was a group of people that had previously ignored us. But still a bunch of people said, "Oh, hey, I'm sorry, I missed your first email. I would be more than happy to sign up." And we still sometimes get those. So it's just it's predicting or understanding that sometimes people just miss your email, and that's how can you phrase a gentle reminder without
Yeah.
overdoing it.
Yeah.
Because you can only go so far, and this is kind of like advice with a caveat, like don't just keep, you know,
Don't go all the way to 3 mail necessarily on this.
yeah,
Like,
or,
don't send 3. At that point,
don't
you're gonna probably be.
ring their doorbell multiple times in the middle of the night, but
I'll
um,
try again. Oh, hey, I'll try again. Yeah.
yeah, but at the same time, there's ways to be kind, a kind reminder of,
Yeah.
especially when you have something really high quality that you think that they could benefit from.
Hmm.
Yeah, and don't assume a campaign is over too soon, which is something I have definitely learned. It's, you think after a couple of weeks, and especially this is good with setting expectations for management or for clients. It's like, oh,
Mm.
it's been 2 weeks and this is how many we got. Well, that suddenly a couple of weeks later, another one will pop up. It really it can take, I mean, some people, and this is pretty rare, but up to months will suddenly, they'll just be like, oh, I linked to your, and you'll be like, oh, you, oh, all right, hi.
I remember you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, this is kind of a great way to be optimistic, but also to just set expectations that it's not just going to happen the next day. And if it doesn't happen the next day, that doesn't mean it's over. No. And then finally, that's our last slide. But yeah, just always be an experimenter is kind of the best
It's
practice of all.
it's fun, but I think it's also challenging and expensive to be an experimenter, and
Hmm.
expensive in terms of you're not necessarily putting all your resources where you know for sure you'll get a return,
Hmm.
right? But I think the important thing is to be looking for opportunities and ways to experiment, thinking clearly about what is possible to actually track and test, and then yeah, just just go and do it. It's absolutely, it's one of my favorite parts of the job of link building is what if? asking those questions, what if, and then trying it out. Actually doing it and seeing what happens. And it certainly helps to have an amazing team. So certainly if it's just you, there is some kind of wonderful autonomy there when it is just you. And so
helps with communication, hopefully.
yeah, it does. Certainly reduces the communication errors.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this definitely was more from the perspective of kind of a multiple person team doing outreach. It'd be interesting. I don't know, Megan. Maybe there's an article or if it's just you, like how to kind of
The
set up
Lone
experience.
Ranger link builder.
The Lone
Yeah.
Ranger, yeah. But I think a lot of the challenge will be then getting up to a volume of email that is really kind of gonna be
Worthy, yeah.
impactful. Yeah. Because it's about, what are we, 5 to 6 minutes for a personalized email usually?
Yeah, sometimes up to 10. I mean,
Yeah.
depending.
So maybe you're doing 6 to 10 emails an hour.
You can burn out pretty quickly. You know.
There's only so many hours you can do that in a row.
Yes.
So, yeah. Don't experiment with that. Trust me.
Yeah. No, please.
There is a best practice there. You're gonna just
Follow
despise your work
yeah.
life. Yeah. And it's never good. But anything else you think we should cover, Megan, or anything like?
We pretty much.
Or I ask if anybody asks any questions.
We don't have any questions. People can
you
always
guys.
further. I know. They can always on Twitter ask us questions at Citation Labs. We're on Twitter.
Okay.
And yeah, no, I think we just about covered it for this one. And if you are looking for more in depth about some of the experiments we've run, I shared it in the chat for GoToWebinar. You can, and if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll share it in the link below YouTube, but in the description box. But you can go check out our blog post that takes some of these things a little more in depth and talks a little bit differently about outreach experiments.
Megan, thank you. This was a lot of fun. You did great today. Thank you very much. Everyone who has been listening, thank you. If you have any experiments that you'd like to share with us, we'd love to know what they are. Especially if you've got parameters around them and kind of under some framework of understanding who you were emailing, what the topic was, what you were testing. We would love to. I mean, that's the best. So we